guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a review for Meg by Steve Alten. This is the story of Jonas Taylor, who is a Navy deep-sea pilot. On a Navy deep-sea mission, he believes that he saw a megalodon, which is a giant prehistoric shark that no longer exists. He panicked and fled to the surface, and as a result, two scientists who were also on his sub died. That ruined his Navy career, and Jonas has essentially spent the following years trying to convince people that the Meg is real and the Meg is actually still alive, and that they actually do exist at the very bottom of the ocean. He's then hired by a private company, does another deep-sea dive, and essentially the Meg escapes and chaos ensues. The plot is not actually very complex, it's mostly just a giant shark eats a bunch of people. The end. I've not filmed a review in a month and I'm feeling a little bit hesitant about getting back into it, so I picked this book because it is a very straightforward book and I have very straightforward, easy to articulate thoughts on it, so hopefully this will still go well. I gave this book 3 stars. It was a little bit of a hesitant 3 stars because I did plan to give it 2 stars from the very beginning, but ultimately it was a 3-star read for me. I'm going to start with the negatives for this one because there are so many negatives that I feel like should be heard first, and then I'll get to my positives and why it actually did receive a 3-star rating instead of a 2. I read this book for Tome Infinity in January. It was the only science fiction book I actually managed to read for that readathon, but this took me the entire month of January. I started it on the 1st and finished it very, very late on the 31st. I would say from January 1st to January 30th, I got through about 80 pages, and then on the 31st I read the following 280 pages, or however many there are in this book. The beginning was very, very slow and boring, and it just seemed to drag on forever. The book didn't pick up at all until the Meg actually escaped and started terrorizing everybody. That was where the book did pick up and I actually got interested. The first 100 or so pages were just painfully boring. And I was so miserable, and I'd pick it up and read a couple of pages and then just have no interest in continuing. I think I actually fell asleep while reading this book about 3 times. There are so many flaws that I don't really know where to begin, so we'll start with characters because that's usually very important for me. The characters in this book were flat. Every single one of them. There was no one that had really an ounce of personality. They felt like they just got their emotions plastered on them. They would just say, oh, Jonas is feeling jealous right now. Jonas is feeling sad. Jonas is feeling afraid. And it was like, the emotions were never real. The characters were never real. The characters just felt like puppets who were prescribed melodramatic actions to show the audience what they were feeling. None of it was ever touching or emotional, even when sad things were happening. I didn't care about a single person in this book, and I doubt really anyone else did either. The second major issue, and one of the reasons the beginning dragged so much for me, was that Steve Alten spends a lot of time describing the equipment, describing the procedures, describing the boats, and I had zero interest in any of that. And honestly, they weren't even descriptions. They were more just lists of facts. The boat is this many feet wide, the boat is this many feet long, there are these number of anchors, or, it was just a list of facts about all the equipment and the boats and the procedures and everything that was happening, and I did not care. Like, that's one of the things I really like so much about movies like this, is that the movie doesn't even try to explain everything or pretend that it's real or that it makes sense. I don't know how much of that information was just a Steve Alten researching this book really well, and how much of it was him having an interest in this subject matter, but I had absolutely no interest in it. And honestly, it would go on for paragraphs and paragraphs, so when he would start describing that in later portions of the book, I'd just straight skip it, because I did not care and I wasn't missing anything by not reading that bit. And if I can skip chunks of your book without reading it, even if they're just, a few paragraphs at a time, that's a serious problem, but I absolutely hated reading that. My final major complaint, before I get into the few positive things I do have to say about this book, was that it was really sexist, like cringe-worthy sexist, and very much definitely a modern type of sexism where he's trying hard not to be sexist, but still is. There were only 2 female characters in this entire book that played any sort of important role. Even if it was just a very small important role, there were only 2. One was Jonas's wife, and one was his love interest. And my complaint was not that they were two-dimensional, because that would be a bad complaint. All the characters were two-dimensional, not just the women, but that did play into it a little bit. Apart from there being just two, they had two very distinct roles in the story. The wife was an evil man-eater. She had no personality, she had no motivations for anything she was doing. She just wanted to destroy Jonas's life and have a lot of sex with his best friend. And that was pretty much her role. I don't really understand why she needed to destroy his life. I don't know why she had to sleep with his best friend in front of him and then, like, act like things were okay later. It was very weird, and she just was entirely in that trope. She had no role outside of that trope. She was just the evil man-eating wife. The second character was the love interest. I don't actually know either of their names, and I'm too lazy to go flip through the pages and check, which kind of shows you how important their characters were. But the second female character was the love interest. She was also a submarine pilot, just like him. She was highly skilled, highly trained, young, but not disturbingly young. I believe she was in her late 20s, maybe like 30 in this book. That was how she appeared to me, at least. But she was never allowed to do anything in the entire book. They would always talk about how highly trained she was, but then she never went on any dives. She never really did anything. She was just sort of around so that they could mention that she was a highly trained pilot, and that was it. And in addition to that, her ability was always questioned. And they would play it off like Jonas would say, "Oh, well, I ask everyone, you know, I check everyone I don't know. I don't know you, that's why I don't trust you. Or you're young, that's why I don't trust you." And I would buy that, except she was the only character who was ever questioned in the story without doing something that was just blatantly wrong. Everyone else, they would assume their ability, except for the love interest. And in addition to that, she just didn't do anything. Her role in the story was to be the love interest. And maybe that changes in later books because this is the first in a series. But apart from swooning on the deck and being the love interest whose life he saved, she didn't do anything at all. And she did literally swoon on the ship at one point. Like, the word swoon was used. So that was kind of laughably bad. Getting into the things I liked about this book, the things I like could also potentially be seen as flaws depending on someone's taste, but I definitely enjoyed them. There were two major things that sort of play into each other. And the first was that this book was so incredibly cliche. Like, painfully cliche to the point where it was hilarious to me, and I almost marked this book as a humor book because it was just funny, and I enjoyed that so much. It was cliche to the point where a Navy character was introduced. He was on a ship that was going after the Meg, and he mentioned as soon as he was introduced that he only had 30 hours left until retirement. 30 hours of active duty, and then he was gonna retire. Rip that dude. Immediately you know that dude is gonna die. And it was hilarious. The amount of cliches were in this book, and just painfully obvious cliches. I thought it was hysterically funny. I enjoyed that so much. That's exactly what I like in movies like this. And if you like that sort of laughable, over-the-top cliche, I really enjoyed that in this book, and you probably would too. If you don't like that, if that sounds awful, stay away from this one, because you wouldn't be able to get through it. The other thing I really liked, which was sort of in the same vein, was the action. Like the cliche was painful and over the top, so was the action. It was ridiculous to the point of humor, once again. And I enjoyed that, because I really enjoy movies like that. That's why I like these trashy shark movies. And that was so much fun in this book. I do think I enjoy that more in movies. I only give this book 3 stars. But the action was funny to read about. At one point, a surfer literally surfed into the open mouth of the Meg and was eaten. And that was hilarious. The shark was once also described as throwing a person up in the air and catching them again in their mouth, like a dog playing with a ball. That was funny. It was ridiculous and over the top and laughable and unbelievable, but so much fun for me. I just had a fun time reading probably the second half of this book. Anything with action was really fun. Not good. I don't think any of my positive points take away from how really awful this book was, and I don't honestly recommend it unless you do kind of like that ridiculous, over-the-top, painfully cliche and you laugh at that kind of thing, you might find something in this book that amuses you. I did. It was a very worthwhile read for me, but I'm definitely not continuing on with the series. I do think there was too many bad things. The writing was too poor for me to really justify reading another book. One was plenty, but I am very glad that I read this one. I do want to add a small note about the movie. This isn't a movie review, I don't review movies, but I didn't care for the movie at all. I thought the movie was fairly boring because I do like it when it's more ridiculous, more cliche, more over the top, and the movie was trying a little bit too hard to be serious. There were funny moments, but overall, I found it very boring. This book was so much better. This book made me wish that the movie was like the book more. Like, if they had just taken this book and straight made it into a movie, that would have been glorious. I would have absolutely adored that. It just made me more disappointed in the movie because there was so much potential and so many amazing scenes. Like, why did we not get a surfer literally surfing into the mouth of the Meg? That was written in the book. It would have been so easy to include that. And yet, they did not. I will be perpetually disappointed by that, but I'm so glad I read the book. I thought the book was very fun. A 3-star read. Not really a good book, but definitely a fun one. Let me know down below if you have read The Meg and what you thought of it if you did. I feel like it could be very polarizing. If you're the kind of person who likes that ridiculous, over-the-top, cliche monster book, it might be up your alley. But if you're looking for a book that is good, maybe not your thing. But please do let me know what you thought of it or if you're planning to read it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all again soon.